Welcome to my presentation today. Moving on to talk much more about the kind of human factors around cybersecurity. And so I'm very much looking at kind of attitudes and behaviours around cybersecurity, and I've called it Mind the Generation Gaps, but really I'm looking at gaps in terms of generation, in terms of gender, in terms of how different people understand cybersecurity and whether that makes any difference on how they actually behave. So, who am I? I'm an independent cybersecurity consultant. I come from a very much a sociological background, and I think that explains how I approach cybersecurity and the very sort of human angle that I take. So I studied sociology and politics for my undergraduate degree. I then worked in regeneration for a while before doing a PhD in a department called Civic Design at the University of Liverpool. Civic Design brings together, it's a very multidisciplinary department, and it brings together town planners with economics, geographers, sociologists, environmentalists, anybody who's kind of interested in how societies work and how we can design them to be more effective. And I was really exploring this idea of the knowledge economy and how different people, different cities and different institutions engage with this idea of the knowledge economy and sort of the importance of information increasingly in our societies. So that's how I got into cybersecurity. I was finishing my PhD, and basically I was kind of headhunted to take on a role in a small London firm where they had a lot of technical expertise, but they were really looking for somebody to bring this more human angle and to look at the issues from a slightly different perspective. So I was a senior consultant with that firm for a few years, and I worked across the public and the private sector, and then left about 9 months ago to set up my own firm. Very much looking at people and processes, policies, training, and I work with a variety of organisations, again still in the public and the private sectors. So, what is my research? As I've said, it's really exploring attitudes to cybersecurity. I've been interested, as we've said today, that it's become much higher on the agenda, this idea of cybersecurity or information security, whatever you want to call it. Over the last 10 years, undoubtedly more and more people have got more interested. It's in the news more, it's a higher profile all round, especially with kind of Snowden and revelations that have come out of that. I think we're seeing people taking more of an interest outside of just the sort of people in this room. So I was really interested to see if the general public are actually worried about it, how much they have taken on board these messages. And because we know that although awareness of cybersecurity can be quite high, that still won't necessarily change behaviours. So no matter how many times we tell people that having a simple password or a simple PIN will leave them more exposed, we still have 11% of the general public with 1234 as their PIN. We had the Cupid media hack and kind of password information coming out of that. 1.9 million users using 123456 as their password. So no matter how many times we repeat these messages, people are still making the same mistakes. So I wanted to try and explore to what extent does attitude actually influence behaviour, and how can we try and make inroads with this sort of human problem of cybersecurity. So I've seen it in my work with organisations. Of course, engagement with cybersecurity varies hugely. And I was interested to see if we can identify patterns between age and gender among the general public, so not people who are particularly interested in cybersecurity, not people who are in an organisation and are being trained on it, people who are literally just kind of your average person. Of course, the internet is still quite new. I remember growing up when we got the internet in my house. I remember my brother showing me the internet when I was about 12 and saying, you can find access to any information you want. What do you want to find out about? And I was stumped. I didn't know what I wanted to know. I couldn't quite comprehend that through this machine I could access any information I wanted. So I remember actually I did say to him, monkeys. Let's have a look into monkeys. And so obviously I was a futurologist, and obviously I realised that a large part of the internet going forward was going to be dedicated to pictures of cute animals. So basically I wanted to do some research that would look at how we can find out what is the level of cybersecurity awareness out there, are people engaged with the subject, are they interested, and how can we better deliver some of our messages. So why this research? Well, obviously I don't need to tell anybody in this room how important cybersecurity is. We know that organisations are leaking information, they are having information stolen from them. We know that most data losses, however, are accidental. So the latest Ponemon and Semantic breach report showed that 2/3 of data breaches were caused by human error. I did a piece of research not long ago looking at the Information Commissioner in the UK and who they were giving monetary penalties to and the kind of advice they were providing for people who have had breaches. And virtually every case, they are saying there needs to be training, there's been no training, there's no awareness. Always, as we all know, simple measures make a huge difference. There's, of course, the cost to organisations. We all know about that, but there's a cost to the individual. And I wondered to what extent is the general public aware of their cost and aware of the risks online. So, for example, we know that online fraud cost the Irish consumers as a whole €25.7 million last year. The UK is the worst place in the world for identity fraud. So there's a huge cost to societies and economies. And of course, there's a direct cost from being attacked, having data, having financial information stolen online. But of course, there's a second-tier effect as well. We saw this in Canada. So the more people are attacked, the more that this becomes an issue in the press. If it isn't backed up with guidance and with support, then people get scared and they disengage with the internet. And suddenly, organisations that were delivering their services via the internet will suddenly be being asked to deliver them in paper form. We saw it happen in Canada, and so there is a risk that in any economy that makes a lot of money from engaging with the internet, the more that there is cybercrime and the more that there is awareness of cybercrime, there's a danger that people will stop engaging and stop using the internet. And when the internet facilitates approximately $10 trillion of transactions a year, and when 1 in every 5 British pound is made by using the internet, we really can't afford for that to happen. So I tend to focus very much on corporate cybersecurity, but for this little piece of research, I decided to look at public awareness. And this is partly because I think when I'm brought into an organisation, when any of us are brought into organisations or asked to work on this, there's already a certain level of awareness. They're asking us to come in and help them for a reason. So I was interested to see, okay, well, if I don't have that factor, if it's just the general public, what's their level of awareness going to be? And although I usually work on the corporate side, I do some media work. So I worked on a programme called Rip Off Britain in the summer, and that's very much working with consumers and how you can, if they have been ripped off or if they feel they've been defrauded, how you can try and help them. So the Rip Off Britain team, they have a group of experts, and I was one of them working with them, so very much working with members of the general public. And I think in this industry, working with the internet sort of every day, you can forget the sort of variety of awareness levels out there. And I was really shocked working on that programme just how low awareness was. We can forget that there are people who think that a browser is somebody who does window shopping. People, really, awareness can be very low or it can be very high. But one thing that I did notice working on it was that there was a lot of interest. I received a lot of questions. People were very worried, but they almost didn't quite know what to be worried about. They just had been told that they should be worried. So I wanted to do this research to just drill down into that a little bit more. So it's a very small piece of research. I carried out a questionnaire, 10 questions, because I wanted to keep it nice and brief and try and get people to actually take part in it. And so I got 76 respondents. You can see the breakdown by age and gender. You can see the vast majority of respondents were in that age group 30 to 40. Now, I distributed the questionnaire mainly through friends and family and their social media outlets. I didn't use any of mine because if I was to tweet it, for example, I know that most people who I engage with on Twitter are people who are especially interested in cybersecurity, so of course that would skew my results. So I'm very confident that I didn't have people like you guys in the room. I didn't have people who were particularly educated or aware in cybersecurity. I had a real sort of variety of respondents, but most people were in their 30s, potentially because I'm in my 30s and the people who were sharing it were in their 30s, so that's possibly why, or possibly because that's an age group that is particularly interested in these issues. I was really disappointed that nobody below 20 filled out the questionnaire, because I think that would have been incredibly telling. I think the fact that nobody did fill it out is quite interesting in itself. I think when you ask someone to take a questionnaire, they have to have a certain level of interest before they'll engage with it, so maybe there wasn't that interest there. As you can see, only one person in their 70s. I was very pleased I had one respondent, but I haven't included their results because obviously you can't make generalisations from one respondent. So, internet use, we've talked about it a lot today. This was the first thing that I questioned my respondents on, how much are they using the internet? It'll be no surprise that everybody is really using the internet an awful lot. Those people in other were people who basically said, I use the internet from when I wake up to when I go to sleep. Online banking, of course, most people use online banking, so that's incredibly popular. And this confirms what we already know, what we've been talking about today. I think it was John who said there was a new internet user every 8 seconds, or maybe it was Jared from Deloitte. But anyway, we know that the internet's incredibly popular. 65% of people in the UK would rather give up alcohol for a year to maintain their broadband. 76% would give up chocolate and 78% would give up coffee. So we all love the internet, we know that. I was quite surprised and very pleased to see the response to this next question. Do they think cybersecurity is important? And absolutely nobody said no. A very small percentage of people weren't sure, but the vast majority of people do think it's important. I missed a trick because I was only asking 10 questions, so of course when I was analysing this I kept thinking of other things I should have asked, and I really wished I'd asked why. Why do you think cybersecurity is important? So when I carry on the research I will definitely ask that. I then asked, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being not at all and 10 being a lot, how much do you worry about cybersecurity? And just inspired by Gaddy, what I would like is a show of hands. Who thinks most people said 5 or below? So they worry about cybersecurity a bit, kind of a little bit, but not too much. Most people probably in the room. Who thinks 5 or above? Yep. See, this is what I thought. I thought most people would say 3, 4, maybe 5. People are quite worried. So most people said that they worried about cybersecurity a score of 8, so quite close to being a lot. So that's 18% of people who scored it an 8. 7 or above scores 44%. So nearly half of the respondents worry about cybersecurity quite a lot. Twice as many people scored 10 as 0. So people are obviously worried about it. Of course you could say that those people who filled in the survey are more likely to be worried about it and so on, but I'm going to take sort of these respondents at face value and see that most people may be influenced by the press and the media reports. People are quite worried about it. I then moved on to behaviours. We won't be surprised to see, I asked really simple questions around behaviour with passwords. I decided to use kind of passwords as the theme for my behaviours. I asked, do you have a different password for every online account that you use? Vast majority of people we can see is at no. So I've got 49%. You can see I've put other, also worked out to be no. These were people who kind of had a system. So they had made some kind of risk balance judgment. They maybe had 4 passwords that they rotated, or they had decided that certain accounts were more important than others, so they kind of had this tiered approach, like a bit of an onion ring approach. So they'd thought about it, they were taking a considered risk, so I still wanted to leave it up there, but ultimately I would put those who said other, and those who said not sure. If you're not sure, that means you don't have a different password for every account. So it works out as about 62% of people who do not have a different password for every online account. Have you ever shared your passwords with anyone else? And again, vast majority of people, 57%, yes, they have shared them. I was interested in why. Their reasons for sharing were overwhelmingly personal. So the vast majority of people said that they had shared personal account details, but not their work ones. I'm quite surprised. I think employers will be very happy about it. I'm a little bit sceptical, and I wonder if people just forget when they've shared their passwords, but that's the response that I get. Only 15% of people share their login information for work. That's come through a little bit funny, but the reasons for sharing, age-old reasons of why people work around cybersecurity. Convenience, they trust the person that they're sharing with, it was an emergency and they needed access and they couldn't get access, or they simply can't remember their passwords alone. Passwords, of course, we know there are huge problems with passwords. We know that people can't remember them and there are more and more accounts, and there's huge problems here. Convenience and trust, I talk to organisations about quite a lot, because trust is a fantastic resource, and if you have an organisation where the staff body trusts one another, then you're likely to have a higher morale. But trust must be sort of surrounded by boundaries, and this is something that, again, John talked about this morning, and the importance of verifying trust, and I would very much reiterate that. I think it's important to note, although only 15% of people share their passwords for work reasons, we of course know that a lot of people use their personal devices for work. So the latest Norton report said that around 50%, I think it's 49% of people, use their personal devices for work. So of course, if you're sharing your login information for your personal device and you're also working on it, you are effectively, to some extent, sharing your work. Also, in terms of sharing passwords, we know that Snowden managed to get about 20 to 25 of his colleagues' login details. So sharing passwords, particularly at work, quite an important topic, and something that you could pick up on in training, using the Snowden example, to kind of reinforce why that's not a good idea. So, does attitude influence behaviour? Well, I've already gone through these. We know that 97% of my respondents think that cybersecurity is important. Nobody thought that it was not important. On a scale of 0 to 10, 44% of people rated it as 7 or above. They worry about it quite a lot. Most people scored it as 8, and twice as many people scored 10 as 0. Yet, it's not looking like a particularly positive picture when most people don't have unique passwords and most people share their passwords. One respondent did say that after sharing their password, they immediately changed it back. And this was someone who'd shared their password for work. They'd shared it with their boss. They immediately changed it afterwards. Again, I didn't ask that question. There may have been more people who did it, but I think it's quite interesting to note. When we drill down, it's a little bit more positive. So out of people who rated cybersecurity worries as less than 5, they were a fair bit less likely to share their passwords, and they were much less likely to have unique passwords. Whereas people who rated cybersecurity worries as 7 or more, so those who are quite aware of it, those who are quite concerned about it, they were more likely both to not share their passwords and to use unique passwords, quite a big jump up. So then I looked up the scale, the people who were scoring at 9 and people who were scoring at 10, and when we got to 10 out of 10, there were only 4 respondents, so again, you can't take it as read, but it was kind of contradictory. Only 1 of those 4 used unique passwords, but 3 of them didn't share them. So their behaviour is a little bit mixed, and I wondered, well actually when you get to the point of worrying about cybersecurity the most, when you are scoring at 10 out of 10, is that actually counterproductive? You're so worried about it that you're putting your head in the sand, or you're just really, really worried about it but you don't know what to do about it. You're so worried because you don't understand it maybe, and I have seen all of those things in organisations. I had a quick look at gender, and again, quite interesting results. Do you have a different password for every online account? Women are far more likely than men to have a different password for every account. You can see women scoring 47%, men scoring 28%, so a really big drop. But before I can get to feminist radical saying that women are the best at cybersecurity, of course, the next lot shows that women are far more likely to share their passwords, far more likely. 69% of my sample who were female shared their passwords, whereas 47% of men, so less than the kind of average. In terms of age, again, really interesting. Do you have a different password for every online account that you use? Suddenly, when my sample got to their 40s, they were far more likely to have a different password for every account. Maybe that's because they're more savvy. Maybe that's because those who are younger have far more accounts. I don't know, but I think it's sort of really interesting that especially that 30 to 40 and 40 to 50, the results basically swap round. Have you ever shared your password with anyone else? Well, anyone in their 40s is incredibly cyber savvy, according to this, because they are the group that aren't sharing their passwords. A man in his 40s, apparently, according to my sample, is the least likely to share his passwords with anyone. Now, I then moved on to look at how do people like to learn. And what I asked was, if you have to learn new information, how do you most like to do it? And this is something that I do if I am introducing a new training program in an organisation. I will try and find out from that group or from that organisation, how do most people like to learn? And again, it goes back to how popular the internet is and how much we rely on it. The fact that 19% of my sample, the biggest majority, like to do internet research themselves and learn about a subject that way. Very closely behind was reading things. We can see the traditional ways of learning, so lectures, textbook learning, they're not popular, it's no surprise. And increasingly organisations are kind of using webinars to deliver training and computer-based training. And again, both of those scored really quite low. So if I was confronted with this and I had to introduce a training to an organisation and I knew I was doing it by workshops, which is often how I do deliver my training, I would then think about, okay, well, how can I incorporate videos into this? And we've seen some great examples of videos today. The Deloitte video this morning was fantastic. There's a great series of trend videos at the minute, Trend 2020, kind of looking forward as to what are the threats, and they're a fantastic way to engage an audience. And I have a Stuxnet video, just to mention Stuxnet again. There's a Stuxnet video called Anatomy of a Computer Virus by a graphic designer called Patrick Clare. A fantastic video, and when I show that in training, I kind of see the room change and people really start to understand the threat. So I would introduce videos, I would think about how to introduce some practical learning, a bit of kind of gamification, coming up with some scenarios and getting people to respond to that. And I also might kind of have some homework, so either before the training session, or if it was a full day in the middle of it, or if I was doing a series of communications for a team, I would get them to go away and each look at something different. So I'd have someone coming back and responding on bring your own device, somebody else talking about social media, just to try and incorporate these more popular ways of learning. So, why did I do this research and what are the implications? I wanted to outline the idea of doing a training needs analysis and the kind of benefits it can bring. So before I ever introduce any kind of training or comms or kind of cultural change program in an organisation, that's the kind of survey I'll do. Obviously I'll have a lot more questions and I won't split the group necessarily by age and gender. I'm more likely to do it by team and department, but I'll know what their needs are, I'll know what their awareness level is, I'll know which particular behaviours they're not engaging with, and I will think about how to kind of take those messages forward. No surprise, everybody loves the internet, of course. People are using it constantly, and that was, of course, no surprise to me at all. I was slightly surprised that it's people's favourite way to learn, and I think it just goes to show how much we are increasingly relying on the net. I was also surprised that most people are worrying quite a lot about cybersecurity. Of course, for our industry, this really presents a great opportunity. And thinking about, we talked this morning about the idea of fear and how you can use fear and channel fear. And I sometimes think this industry, we don't channel it in the right way. Sometimes we just scare people so much that they're put off and they think it's such a huge problem and it's so big, actually it has nothing to do with little old me, and it's so huge I'll never quite get my head around it, it's very technical. And we just kind of sometimes can put people off. So whenever I'm thinking about kind of cybersecurity awareness, I think about Howard Leventhal and his team of psychologists. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with these experiments, but in 1965, Leventhal and his team were looking at how to get more people to take tetanus injections. So there was the tetanus vaccination, but nobody was taking it. People were still getting very ill. So Leventhal and his team thought, okay, we'll use fear to persuade people. We'll show a bunch of students pictures of really lurid like symptoms, you know, so convulsions and other very unpleasant things that people suffer from when they get tetanus. And what they found was that everybody in the group was much more likely to say, yes, we need to get a tetanus shot. Yes, this is very bad, we're very worried, we're very scared, and we'll get a tetanus shot. Of course, they didn't then go and get tetanus shots. So they said it was important, but when Leventhal's team followed up, nobody had bothered. 1% of the group had gone and got their injection. So what they then did was show the pictures, show the damage that can be done from tetanus, and then it was students, so they gave the students a map of the campus, and they showed where the health centre was to get the injection, they showed when it was open, and a contact telephone number. They also drew on the map how to get from, I think it was the library, basically somewhere that everybody, all students would know how to get from there to the health centre. And in that group, 30% of people went and got a vaccination. It's still not 100%, but it's an awful lot better than one. And I always think about this in terms of cybersecurity. I think fear can be persuasive, but I think it needs to be channeled. And I think we need to join up with the dots for people. We need to say the role that you play as an individual, why cybersecurity matters to you, and also what you need to do to protect yourselves. So we need to give them a map. Much like Leventhal and his team did, we need to make it much, much easier. So, next steps. I'm going to carry on this research. I'm going to keep doing it with, like I say, the sort of general group of the public. I really want to target older and younger groups. I'm thinking of contacting schools and universities and trying to get some younger groups engaged. I want to explore a little bit more about why this rating for cybersecurity was so high, and higher than I expected, and it turns out higher than most people in this room expected. I think it would have been really interesting to have asked this question a few years ago and be asking it again now to see if it has shot up in the last year or so. I also plan to obviously explore different areas of behaviour, so for example social media and other sorts of things beyond passwords. And different sectors. I think it'd be fantastic to look at this on an organisational or sector level and compare and contrast what are the more cybersecurity savvy industries and which are not. So, just to very briefly conclude, I think in terms of cybersecurity, it's about achieving a balance, and it's always weighing up the risks and the benefits and working out the best way ahead. But really, the message that I want to give you with this last slide is that cybersecurity should be a positive thing. The negative is cyber insecurity. But too often we kind of engage in this idea that cybersecurity is negative, that it is a blocker and that it gets in the way, when actually it's an enabler. It's more likely to let you continue to carry out your business and make money. So I really think we need to get that message across, that cybersecurity isn't the problem, but cyber insecurity is. Thank you very much, everybody. If anybody has any questions. If anybody would like to keep in touch, if anybody has any questions, I'd love to take them now, but otherwise, various ways to keep in touch, and I hope you will. Thank you. Any questions? Hi.
Do you think there's any chance that people are actually afraid of computers as opposed to afraid of cybersecurity? The general population might differentiate between the two.
Yeah, I think people are scared of computers, and they're a bit scared of the internet, although they totally rely on it. So that's quite interesting to rely on something and not understand it, I think is quite terrifying. So probably, yeah, they kind of lump it all together. I had a lot of people, I referred to doing the Rip Off Britain thing, and when I had members of the public coming to me, most of them were coming to me not with an actually particular issue, just saying, I don't know what to do about my computer security, I'm really scared, I don't know if I've got a virus, I don't know how to not get a virus, and they just wanted some general help. So I think you're right, I think the bar's quite low. Yeah. Any more? Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I'm just wondering, many people in your breakdown with women, many with men?
Yep, I'll go back to it. So I had, I think it was 43% or 44% were women, so it was slightly more men. Oh yeah, there we go. 43% female, 57% male. So I was quite pleased. Obviously I would have liked it more 50-50, but I was quite pleased. For a while, a lot more men were filling it in, so I was quite pleased to actually get that balance. Hi.
So do you believe continuous awareness will change the behavior mindset of people?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it in organisations, and It takes a lot. It takes a lot of work. It takes, if you're talking about an organisation, it takes leadership from the top, and it takes resources, and it takes sort of a real commitment to actually change behaviours. But yeah, I've been involved in programmes where I've delivered training, and I've worked on the policies, and done audits, and kind of kept doing those audits, done communication programmes, and by doing all of these different angles, I've seen huge changes in cybersecurity awareness, and I've seen people really embrace it as a positive thing. But it's just a case of doing it in the right way, of using lots of different mediums to sort of spread your message, and making sure that people are engaged. I sometimes think if we start off too high, then we lose the people down here, and then they're gone, they're lost completely. Thank you. Hi.
Under what circumstances are you usually called into an organisation? Does it tend to be after some kind of incident, or are there proactive people out there?
It is usually after an incident. The other times that I'm brought in is when it's an organisation part of a supply chain, and they will have somebody who's asking them, okay, so what are your behaviours like? We need you to do an audit. Are you doing training? And they won't be doing anything, and so they'll panic, and that's when they bring me in. It's quite rare that an organisation just gets in touch just because they're thinking about it and they've got some money that they'd just love to spend on it.
Sorry, just to follow up then, what's the split between like government versus private sector, or like do you tend to get called into government organisations, schools, hospitals, or is it mainly private sector?
Yeah, it's actually increasingly private sector. So when I started out a few years ago, I was very much more focused on the public sector. But now I am finding more private sector organisations are getting in touch. There are still, I think, some huge gaps, and I know people are coming to me and saying like younger children, education, all the people educating younger children, the teachers, nursery nurse workers, all that kind of thing, a huge gap there. So I think there's a split. I think government organisations, a lot are a bit ahead of the private sector, others are kind of way behind. The private sector knows that it needs to catch up, it knows that there's this issue. Certain organisations are really worried after the Snowden revelations. So I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, folks, we're going to have to move on to the next speaker.
Sorry. I'm around, so thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.